This video was brought to you by Brilliant, and the first 200 people to sign up using the link below will get 20% off an annual premium subscription. For the last few weeks or so, the Netherlands has been paralysed by farmers protesting the country's new environmental targets. Videos of Dutch farmers attacking police cars with hammers, towing them with tractors, or ramming police barricades have been going viral on Twitter. And there's even been reports of police firing at farmers. So in this video, we're going to be looking at the protests themselves, what's caused them, and what might happen next. For some context, despite its small size, the Netherlands is actually an agrarian powerhouse. According to 2019 data from the Dutch government, the Netherlands is the world's second largest food exporter by value, only falling behind the United States. Of its 82 billion euros worth of agricultural exports, the vast majority go to its European neighbours, with Germany accounting for about a quarter of all exports. In fact, the agricultural sector in the Netherlands constitutes around 10% of the Dutch economy and employs more than 660,000 people, representing about 4% of the country's population. Add to that, more than half of the land in the Netherlands is used for farmland, with 56% for arable and horticultural crops, 42% for permanent grassland, and 2% for permanent crops. Anyway, agriculture's outsized role in the national economy means that it's responsible for a significant fraction of the Netherlands' total greenhouse gas emissions. It's estimated that Dutch agriculture accounts for about 14% of all national emissions and about 40% of all nitrogen emissions. Anyway, in 2019, the Council of the State, an advisory body to the government headed by the King himself, ruled that the Netherlands' existing environmental regulations are insufficient in order to meet their nitrogen oxide and ammonia emission goals. So, in order to meet those standards, which are dictated by laws and treaties that the Netherlands is part of, the government announced that they'd be taking radical steps in order to curb their emissions. This meant significant reductions to agriculture, given that it accounts for about 40% of all nitrogen emissions in the country, which is why the first farmers' protests began all the way back in 2019, until COVID put a stop to them. However, protests restarted last month in response to another proposal from the government to pursue a net 50% reduction in nitrogen oxide and ammonia emissions by 2030. With the EU's Natura 2000 areas being subject to an even larger 75% reduction. Now, while nitrogen only accounts for about 6% of global warming, deposition of excess nitrogen into the land degrades the broader ecosystem and therefore reduces biodiversity, which is why this is such a pressing issue for the government. Now, the major contributor to nitrogen emissions is farm cattle, which account for about 60% of all agricultural nitrogen, which is why the plan aims to reduce the number of cattle by 30%, requiring the elimination of 1 million cows and 4 million pigs. And as you'd expect, this didn't go down too well with farmers. So on June 22nd, thousands of them took to their tractors and headed to the centre of the capital, causing widespread traffic chaos in protest. And in the week since, the protests have spread to the rest of the Netherlands, and there have even been solidarity protests from farmers in Germany, Italy, Poland, and Spain. As well as using their tractors to bring the country to a standstill, Dutch farmers have also sprayed government buildings with manure and blockaded distribution centres, leading to empty shelves in supermarkets. So, why are the protesters causing so much chaos? Well, the farmers have three related but distinct complaints. Firstly, they think that the required cuts are too demanding. While the government have created a €1 billion fund to help farmers make the targets, reducing cattle by 30% will almost definitely put some farmers out of business. And there's been speculation that the government will have to nationalise land to meet the target. Secondly, they argue that they've already done their bit to help the environment. And to be fair to the farmers here, since the 70s, agricultural emissions have fallen by about 30% per pig and 45% per cow. The use of fertilizers has also been halved, and nitrogen emissions are down 56%. Thirdly, farmers argue that there's not much point reducing emissions. Despite being one of the largest producers by value, the Netherlands are only the 60th largest agricultural producer in the world. So even if they do reduce the number of cows, the farmers claim that this will just mean consumers buying their meat from other, under-regulated, poorer countries like Brazil, which will do just as much damage to the environment. In fact, farmers argue that while agricultural emissions might contribute significantly to climate change, as much as 45% by some estimates, ultimately any significant reduction in emissions will require action from bigger, more intensive producers too, like China and India. Now, the debate here essentially revolves around the tragedy of the commons. No one country alone can make a decisive difference to climate change, which means it's in no single nation's self-interest to pursue overly costly climate strategies. Which means that often people don't want to do anything at all. Anyway, in response, the government has said that they're willing to negotiate, but has ruled out backing down on its general strategy. However, it is worth mentioning that the government's position is coming under increasing pressure. Polling from late June found that the Farmer Citizen Movement, a fringe party that won just 1% of the vote in the 2021 general election, was now the second most popular party in the country, and would win 18 seats in the 150-seat parliament if an election were to be held today. That same polling found that the farmers' protests were becoming a real swing issue, with many voters signalling that they would change their vote if their preferred party changed its position on the farmers' protests. And with food prices already at all-time highs, it's clearly in the government's interest to get these protests under control as soon as possible. As a final thing, these protests are interesting because they're a case study in the amount of political will for costly environmental policies in Europe. So far, Europeans have mostly been in favour of green policies. However, this is in part because Europe has only done the easy bits of the green transition, changing from coal to gas, improving insulation, tweaking financial incentives to balance out energy consumption, that kind of thing. And it's possible that if Europe really wants to be net zero by 2050, future green policies will require greater sacrifice. And at least for the moment, no one knows how much Europeans will be willing to sacrifice in the name of net zero. And while this is only one data point, it does suggest that the answer is, well, not as much as many would have predicted. In the end then, we'll just have to wait and see how these protests play out and how Europe reacts. But this is the ultimate problem-solving exercise, something which is always at the heart of politics, whether it be making the electorate happy or trying to tackle climate change. So, if you want to be able to do what politicians often can't, then consider signing up to Brilliant. That's the STEM learning platform which actually features a class on the joy of problem solving. In that class, like all of their others, they use active learning techniques to help you learn complex subjects, like logical reasoning, deducing facts from fiction, and logic puzzles, with you learning through fun and engaging activities. These interactive classes cover all kinds of STEM topics too, from computer science and cryptocurrency to statistics and casino probability. So if you want to take your next step in STEM and support the channel at the same time, then you can sign up to Brilliant at brilliant.org/TLDREU. And the first 200 people to do so will get 20% off an annual premium subscription. Thanks for your support.